Good afternoon and welcome back to Aalto University's public lecture series 5G, what do we all have to know? This is the sixth lecture during this autumn, and as you have been seeing before, we have had excellent lectures on this topic, and hopefully you have learned as much as I have already done during this autumn. We are actually having two lectures left today, and the next one is after 2 weeks, and the last lecture will not be about 5G. It will be about 6G, so we are looking more forward. As you know, our students, please follow the chat in Zoom, and you will find the code so you can verify your attendance. But let's go to this evening's or afternoon's lecture. Sami Häggman from DNA, you work as a business manager. Warmly welcome to Aalto University.
Thank you very much, Jarno, and welcome to all on my behalf as well. Happy to be here.
Excellent. And your title of your lecture is Digitizing Business with 5G. Before you start, how would you summarize your lecture?
Yes, so 5G is just as much a business question as it is a technology. But in media and perceptions, 5G is often perceived as technology. And you think about it as alternative to 4G or like some technical solution. Shall we have 5G instead of fiber connections? But I'd like to broaden the horizon a little bit more and also involve the business thinking in developing the 5G. And that's what I think is crucial in determining the success of 5G and the benefits that companies and society will gain from 5G.
Excellent. Please, Sami, floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Jarno. All right. So starting off with a quick introduction. My name is Sami Häggman, and I'm working at DNA, which is one of the big three operators here in Finland. And I'm working as a business manager in our B2B division, so working with corporate customers. And I've been working on 5G for the past 2.5 years. So bringing the 5G to the market and engaging in quite many discussions with different customers regarding on 5G. What does it mean to companies? What expectations do companies have? What are kind of the realistic paths on starting to deploy 5G and building the roadmaps on what could the companies do with 5G? So happy to share some of the insights on 5G with you guys, and hopefully this will raise many interesting ideas on regarding how 5G could be utilized by consumers, by businesses, and by societies at large. All right, so back to the question, why do we need 5G? So you've had 5 minutes time to think about the right answer during the technical issues. So I hope you have good ideas on your head. I'm going to give one view to the question. So basically, here is mobile data traffic per smartphone, how it has evolved since 2017 up till 2021. This is where we are at the moment, and the projections, how it will continue in the future. We see a steep curve rising all the time. In Finland, we are even higher. We have the highest mobile data traffic users per subscription here in Finland. And the clear reason is that if we think about our daily lives, what do we do quite many hours per day? It is we're working on these mobile phones, checking out apps, checking out social media. And if we compare the time consumption we have increased manyfold how much time we spend on smartphones per day, and the content that we are viewing has become much more data intense, more videos, more higher quality. And that has really driven up the data consumption. And of course, as there is more data consumed, the existing bandwidths or previous bandwidth with 4G, they become more and more congested, and the users need more traffic or more capacity for their traffic. And that's why the 5G with new frequencies is the logical step to build the next generation of data usage and allow the continuation of the digitalization. So we need more capacity. And the other side of the story is that it's also good business for huge ecosystems globally. So companies can benefit from 5G by making new services, enhancing their operations, enhancing their customer experience, and also lots of players can either make their existing business more profitable or introduce new services to the market. This is only the 5G infrastructure market, almost 100 billions within the next 7 years. And it's only a small fraction of the total market. So the market opportunity is huge. So there is definitely demand for 5G related services. And if we look a little bit more detailed on how the 5G penetration is developing now, the past couple of years have been really heavy on network building. So at the moment, 5G coverage here in Finland is almost 3 million Finns, so more than half of the population. Of course, centering around larger cities in 124 towns at the moment, and rapidly expanding into other parts of the nation. And in a few years' time, we should have a national 5G coverage. So this is one side of the story. So 5G is available for more and more people. And at the moment, it has reached the levels where it is pretty generally available for most of the people who want to start using 5G. This is another story. So of course, we need 5G coverage, and then we need 5G devices. 2 years ago, 5G devices were expensive, very limited. But now if you look at the list of most sold phones, out of 15 top phones, only 3 are not 5G compatible. So the devices are evolving towards 5G rapidly. So whenever people change into a new phone, it is typically 5G compatible. Of course, if you look into other areas like industrial devices, then 5G is not supported in many of the existing devices, but for the new models, 5G is more and more often supported. But in many industries, it takes 5 years or 10 years or even 20 years before the devices get renewed. So the cycle is much longer than in mobile phones, which are changed roughly every 2 years. Then you need subscriptions. So coverage and network devices and subscriptions. And 5G subscription penetration is increasing at a higher rate than what it was with 4G. So more and more people are starting to use 5G in their 5G phones. And if you take a global perspective, we are here in Western Europe, and the orange column shows the share of 5G subscriptions. So we are among the forefronts of 5G users globally, in addition to, for example, North America, Gulf region, and Asia. So we're definitely in a position to benefit from the high and early 5G penetration. That's, for example, what grew Nokia as the global leader in cell phones in 3G era, since we were among the forerunners. So we also have a good position in 5G to build the ecosystem here in Finland and benefit from the early 5G adoption. So that's one reason, a good benefit for the Finnish companies to invest in 5G, to be driving the market and seeking the international opportunities with it. And what does the 5G offer for companies? And of course, I come from B2B side, so it's more natural to talk about the companies, but trying to cover the B2C use cases as well. So first of all, we'll have fiber-like connections to homes and company sites, offices, and you need good connections for digital working or utilizing many electrical devices, TV, PlayStation, and parents in Teams meetings at the same time at home. So good connectivity is increasingly important. We have all noticed it during the pandemic that how important it is to have good connections at home when a lot of people are using them at the same time. So these home connections has been one driver for many companies and people to start using 5G during the pandemic. Then there is the easiest use case to understand, so 5G phones. And many people think when you say 5G, only thing they can come up with is 5G phones. Of course, it's easy to understand when we have had 4G in our phones that it's the next generation there. So basically, quite many people ask that, why do I need 5G? I'm perfectly fine with 4G. And 4G is definitely the biggest competitor to 5G here in Finland, since we have such a good 4G networks. And while we are building the 5G networks, we have also improved the 4G networks as well, increased the capacity there, increased the service level for our customers, also in 4G. So basically 5G, I think the early adopters in 5G subscriptions are naturally gamers and young people who use a lot of internet and a lot of data traffic and want the high capacity and low latency in their phones. And of course, in many professions, you can benefit from having high-speed subscriptions. If you are, for example, working in field and processing a lot of media, like a media company producing videos, for example, live from the streets of Helsinki, for example, or if you are a field worker who needs to take video footage, for example, from a construction site or something, you can download it immediately to the AI to be processed. So that kind of use cases demand higher bandwidth and benefit from the capacity of 5G. So in these areas, 5G is moreover an evolutionary step from 4G and from fixed line connections, fiber, and copper connections. So it's very close to the business and use cases that we are seeing with 4G and other technologies. And in addition to the evolutionary steps, there is a bigger revolution being taken place on how new type of use cases can be implemented on top of 5G. IoT is one area where 5G provides higher capacity, lower latency, and significantly higher number of devices. And IoT is definitely one of the areas where 5G is needed, as more and more devices are connected to the internet, and the data used there is demanding higher capacity, more real-time traffic going on in the IoT networks. And there are these industry-specific use cases combining 5G with different technologies. I'll come back to these later on. So this is kind of the short-term horizon, and this is the area that is going to shape and change the world a lot more once we go into deeper and start building the use cases on top of 5G. So let's start digging into these 4 boxes one by one, starting from the fiber-like connections. So basically, with 5G, you can get fiber-like connections to homes, to offices, to a large extent in a similar fashion as you have been able to get them in 4G. So that is evolution, a step from that onwards. And basically, if you think about, for example, a company who has operations in these pink dots, it is quite easy to get fiber connections in the largest cities and in urban areas. But if you go a little bit further off from the urban areas, then fiber connections start to be more and more limited. And if you want a high bandwidth in your sites, it's going to get more challenging. So for example, if you have a retail chain or if you have a construction site and you want to digitalize your processes, you want to enable your workers some tools in every single site, which enable modern technology and therefore more efficient work processes. Then suddenly the data connectivity becomes a bottleneck for development. And this is what, like, one area that 5G is bringing help to. So basically, if you have a site, then you can select fiber if it's available. And if it's not available, then picking 5G for high capacity, or picking 4G if 5G is not available. So you can select the best possible connections and have high enough data rates to support your business. So this is one area that we have higher capacity with broader coverage area. So 5G really helps with the last mile solution to bring the high capacity connections to more and more people, more and more offices and homes. And one area why we say fiber-like connections is a new type of mobile connections, fixed wireless access. So basically in 4G, all the fixed data connections were best availability. So if the network is crowded, your connection speeds go down. But in fixed wireless access, we can guarantee the capacity also in 5G. And it requires an external antenna, which will guarantee the signal speed to the location. So this is one element how you can utilize 5G also in more critical use cases and ensure the sufficient data rates. And basically, this fixed wireless access is boosting the use cases for 5G and mobile connectivity. It can be an alternative to fiber when fiber is not available, or it can be a backup solution for fiber acting as a secondary connection. Then 5G mobile connections and the smartphones. So if we think about that, what's the kind of value add and the difference that 5G brings? the best thing to understand is starting from 4G. So going back in history, if you think about 10, 15 years back when we didn't have 4G phones, our lives were a lot different. And if you think of, for example, this pandemic time, it would have been a whole lot different if we didn't have 4G available. So if we couldn't go to web shops to do our errands, if we couldn't join Teams meetings or connect with our friends via phones, so that would have been a whole lot of different experience. And we've had such a smooth transition from office life to remote working, remote schools, that people have been so surprised that life hasn't been that different at all. And we have been able to work and study pretty much in the same fashion as well. 4G is a big thing to thank for it. So we have the mobile phones in practically every pocket that we are using really actively, and that's enabled by 4G. We have some killer apps that have really driven the usage of 4G and brought value into those smartphones that we have. Facebook, YouTube, really important in driving the early adoption of 4G and smartphones in the consumer side. And of course, Teams meetings being crucial to practically every business today. If we look into the 5G, when we compare to the 4G, who would have thought like 10 or 15 years ago that 4G would bring such a huge evolution into our lives? The same applies to 5G. If we think about 5G just as another G, the next G after 4G, and think about it that okay, we'll just get a little bit faster data speed. It doesn't seem like a big change, but what if 5G brings as big of a change as the 4G ecosystems have brought to our lives? I think it will be. What will it look like? I don't think anybody of us knows exactly, but we know that there are huge opportunities and we need to start thinking about the business side really differently. What if smartphones is not the end device that we'll be using with 5G? It can be, of course, and it will be for a long time. But what if a large portion of the time we'll be using augmented reality or virtual reality headsets to engage socially or consume content supported by the 5G network? And for AR adoption, 4G is let's say that for basic use cases, it's sufficient. But if we want to have higher resolution, lower latency, causing less dizziness, for example, then 5G is really the platform where you can start building these AR applications. And one good indication of the potential that companies see in this development is metaverse. So Facebook rebranded themselves into Metaverse and changed their logo as well. And they believe that this is the future of internet. And if Facebook believes it's really possible that it's going to turn out so. So what this metaverse means, it's kind of a huge virtual reality. So the internet will transform into virtual world where we will engage through different end devices. It can be phones, it can be headsets, and we engage socially with avatars and seeing one another's facial expressions while we are talking or having a meeting with our colleagues from all over the world, as well as doing business in metaverse, the virtual reality. So 5G can bring all kinds of new kind of scientific utopias that we have had for a long time into reality. And there's lots of benefits to be explored in that trajectory, and only time will tell how fast that evolution will go and which are the areas that really pick speed and popularity, and which are those wild dreams that will be shot down because there is no consumer demand for that, or the costs of implementing them are too high or complex. So think big, think differently, and try to keep an open mind about seeing the possibilities beyond the existing use cases. Then IoT, so the third box here. IoT is really a big driver for 5G. So 4G brought phones to the people and fast connectivity, but the number of subscriptions will be exploding once the IoT connectivity expands. So there are trajectories of like 20+ billion IoT devices connected in the internet within some years. And basically, there's a huge potential in having all kinds of sensors, for example, in this studio room where we are at, monitoring and controlling the climate and lighting here, and all kinds of industrial applications where you can have the machines talking to one another. So imagine, for example, e-commerce fulfillment center where there are hundreds of robots going back and forth, picking up the right products for the deliveries and going across one another without colliding. Those machines need to be talking to one another, need to be connected to the internet, and this is reality already now. And for IoT, there are different levels that basically you can have just kind of visibility into what's happening with the machines, what is the temperature and humidity of the air, for example. So you can have a kind of basic level control of what is happening. Then you can start controlling operations based on that IoT data. And then you can start remotely controlling different devices. And then you can start automating the devices and giving them the autonomy to make decisions on their own based on that data. And there are many levels. Different companies are different level in development. And this is a trajectory that will be picking up pace with 5G. So basically, if you are building IoT technology on top of mobile networks, you will gain from the licensed spectrums, the disturbance-free spectrums, and the data security features of mobile networks. And you also have many different mobile network technologies, how you can implement those IoT use cases. So you have low energy consumption technologies like narrowband IoT, LTE-M, and then you have more real-time traffic IoT use case supporting 4G and 5G technologies. And what 5G brings to the picture is that you can have real-time traffic, high speed, low latency communications happening over 5G. So for example, running videos, doing real-time analytics and controlling of devices in real time. So this is basically the spectrum of mobile technologies that you can utilize. And if there aren't latest 5G devices available in the market yet, you can start with 4G or other technologies. You can use narrowband IoT is for those devices that don't need high data rates, but need really reliable connections, long battery lifetimes, and then use, for example, vehicles, these 5G IoT connections. Okay, then going to the last box. So use cases in different industries. So of course, we need to have the business drivers. So if you think about just the connectivity with 5G connections, the benefits are limited. You can get somewhat better results than with today's technologies. But if you really want to improve the safety or quality, process management, customer experience, efficiency, these type of business goals, then typically you need to combine different technologies. You need to change the processes, engage in a larger value network to bring the benefits. So basically 5G is a key enabler to take this type of goals into the next level. There are many industries, different verticals where we see 5G picking up at different paces. Industry and logistics are definitely the industries driving the 5G adoption at the moment, having very data intensive operations where 5G is a huge benefit. Field service workers, engineering, working with 3G modeling, smart cities, very active in building the ecosystems and the roadmaps for utilizing 5G, healthcare, retail, media. So pretty much across all the verticals, there are good use cases for adapting 5G. These are the types of applications then that you see typically with 5G. So monitoring and analytics, that's typically where many companies start out getting a better understanding and data for the basis of decision making. For example, how do our machines across the country or world operate? What kind of usage profiles do they have? And that is done for R&D purposes, for optimizing the maintenance then. Where 5G comes into place is when you start utilizing video. So for example, quality control or safety related analytics. And then when you have a lot of information and rich contextual information, you typically need to combine it with artificial intelligence, AI, to get the business benefits from the vast amount of information and data that you have. And also digital twins, and modeling in 3D digitally, the real life cases that significantly speeds up the product development process when you can test different prototypes in digital twins and examine their properties, or also across the life cycle from maintenance to upgrades. Process automation and robotics. So basically, you can implement even more critical use cases with 5G. So it has ultra reliable, low latency functionalities that can be introduced to really critical real-time environments. And we have a lot of like drones and different machines in the autonomous vehicle box benefiting from 5G. So for example, you have remotely operated harbors already in place utilizing 5G and many other application areas. So even though the fully automated vehicles and autonomous vehicles in city traffic, that's going to be a long time horizon before that's a reality. There are already pilot buses running autonomously on top of 5G. So it's coming, and there's a lot of other changes like legislation that needs to be changed before reaching this point. Rich experiences, VR, AR, videos, 3D, holograms. So for example, sports events, how you can provide rich information on the players or different screen angles, or retail experience, providing the product information via the consumer's mobile phone, for example. And of course, the existing and new business applications. So basically, enabling the digitalization of the processes by removing the bottlenecks that have come from connectivity so far. So a lot of use cases in a lot of industries demanding combination of 5G, robotics, AI, VR, AR, IoT. So this is really a big puzzle that you will need to bring together. I'll show an example at the end, kind of demonstrating on the complexity of the ecosystem. And I talked in the previous slide that you can build even more critical environments on top of 5G. This is one example that if you have a factory site, you might have outdoor operations with vehicles going back and forth and logistics to be managed. And you might have also factory operations that want to be automated indoors. And you have some like trucks going from indoors to outdoors. They're typically the kind of conventional operator network is not sufficient for the most critical use cases demanding really high capacity and low latency. So basically, then you need to have a private network where that capacity is dedicated to that specific customer and tailored to meet the needs of customers' operations. And that you can do with 4G, but also with 5G, and have basically the business needs dictating that what kind of network you have to support your operations. And you can have all the traffic staying within the customer site by having solutions called local breakouts, which will keep the data traffic from mobile IoT subscriptions within the customer perimeters. So basically, the traffic will not go back and forth to the operator's core network and back to the customer site, but stay on this private network, increasing data security and also reducing the latency, the delay in the mobile traffic. And then we have the edge computing. When we have a network which is providing very low latency, it doesn't make sense to take the traffic to the cloud, which would then increase the end-to-end latency. So to understand very simply what is edge computing, basically it's bringing the processing power near the users. So as a use case, you could think about a police car, which is using a video feed on its dashboard to identify the license plates of the cars that are coming across it. And one option would be to send the whole video feed, very heavy traffic, all the way to the cloud and identify the register number. But what if you would have an edge computing server in the police car? And that would process the video feed and identify the register number and only send that registration number to the cloud. Doesn't need like 5 seconds of video footage to identify the number of the registration, but you could do it on the edge and only send the registration number in the cloud. And in the cloud, you would have the database of different registration numbers, and it would return to the police car a signal that we have a warrant on this car, so please stop, or there is something suspicious with this car, it has been reported stolen, so please react to this car. So cloud would do all the intelligence operations, and the data heavy operations would take place on the edge. Same applies with for example, a factory. So you have some data intensive and delay critical, latency critical activities that need to be taken care of on the edge. And then you have other operations, for example, machine learning, reporting, and such, which can take place in the cloud. So sending less traffic to the cloud and optimizing the usage. What is done on the edge and what is done in the cloud with massive databases, for example. So far we have seen the transition of computing to the cloud. So now we are taking a step backwards and bringing some of the computing to the edge, which is smart to do on the edge. So that's really what the edge computing is about in short. And in combination with private network, we can have the connectivity as well as the processing to support these latency critical, high data bandwidth requiring tasks. And of course, we have different environments. And with these private networks, you have quite many different benefits that are sought with. So one thing is having isolated traffic. So you can have operations, for example, all over Finland. You can have hundreds of stores running on across Finland with different information processed, and you can have all those IoT devices in the same network connected to your corporate network and isolated from the other traffic. And you can have guaranteed capacity. So for example, this type of operations, if you have high number of video feeds covering a factory area or larger areas, then you need to increase the capacity within the networks to support that workload. Or if you need local traffic for safety reasons or security reasons, or for low latency, as in the data critical real-time traffic, for example, in automating processes within a factory. Or you can need to have customer-specific tailoring using selected bandwidths within the mobile network to cover your use cases. For example, mining is a typical area where they have very specific requirements on what type of conditions need to be supported by the mobile network. Or you need to have customer-specific operations. For example, a nuclear power plant where it's really critical and the operators want to have the control of the network on their own hands, so that if the operator's network out in the outside world goes down, then this customer-specific network still keeps operating independently of the operator's network. So you have different reasons to pick a private network, and therefore you have also various deployment options. So you can have fully customer-specific hardware and operations dedicated to that specific customer only, or you can utilize the operator's network. There are many options in the 5G. You can utilize access point network. So for example, connecting all the IoT devices into customers' MPLS network, customers' corporate network. You can have slicing, which is a 5G feature providing guaranteed capacity or latency within a these customers' SIM cards. So basically, you can dedicate that these SIM cards need a guaranteed capacity for their usage, so you can run more critical use cases there. Prioritization of traffic, local breakouts, that meant keeping the traffic locally, not taking it back and forth to the operator's core network. And regional or local edges to provide the low latency processing power. So basically, if you had a factory, you could have very customer specific network. But if you have like retail stores all around Finland, then you could utilize the operator's network and provide the necessary data separation or guaranteed capacity with slicing on top of the operator network. For example, there's one of our customers, which is an open pit mine, which has a huge area to cover with operators network. So we just built increasing capacity to the operator network, and the customer was able to implement video surveillance with drones into that mining area to provide the sufficient capacity for their usage. So there was no sense in investing a lot of money in the customer specific equipment when you could utilize the operator's existing equipment and infrastructure very cost efficiently to bring the sufficient capacity and isolation of traffic for that site. And then to the ecosystem. So coming to the last couple of slides. So basically, this is a very complex entity. So how to build these 5G use cases. So in the previous slide, we had some cameras and trucks running around the industrial site. And then you might have somebody in the remote management center running the operations with VR headset or AR headset and controlling the operations if there is some problem situation, for example. What happens in between? You need the connectivity, so the SIM cards into the equipment and the cellular network. Not going into the details, what's behind that, the radio access networks and core networks. Then you have the edge computing, so the processing power on the customer site. Then you need to have the secure connections, so data connections to the cloud or data center with data security. And you need to have the capacity. It can be cloud capacity from Azure or AWS or traditional data centers. And then you have the applications. You have somebody who has developed the applications for this total process to work and the end devices that this controller is working on. So this is a huge ecosystem. You need different players playing different parts. You might have somebody providing the cameras, another one providing the truck solutions. Then you have some logistics optimization software there. So you have and automation of these trucks. So you can easily have 10 companies putting their efforts together to come up with this solution. And it means that it's time consuming, it's difficult to manage for any company. So you need to find those use cases where it adds the most value and it's easier to implement to start out with. And then there is, of course, the end-to-end orchestration. Who manages this? What if something goes wrong? Where can we pinpoint the problem? Who goes on site if something goes wrong? So this is a very complex ecosystem that typically needs high reliability 24/7 operations and needs cooperation between many different players. And coming to the final slide. So few tips just to summarize what we have discussed on how to start reaping of the benefits from 5G. So first of all is thinking 5G as a platform for digitalizing business. It's not just connections. It's a platform where you can have so many different use cases that benefit from the same technology, and having one common platform makes the development a whole lot easier. So for example, if you have that industrial site and you build camera feeds to provide the real-time information, you can start out with security use cases. So you need to have an alarm system that stops the vehicles if there is traffic, pedestrian walking across the driveway, for example. Safety is quite important driver quite often. And as you have built the camera coverage for the harbor or for the industrial site, think what else can you do with that video feed? Can you utilize it to track assets within that area? Can you utilize it to optimize the routes of the vehicles? And that's what starts building value from the investments you make. And second one is to really acting use case driven. So don't go with the technology first. Think about what are the use cases that you need to implement, that are easy to implement, that are kind of isolated enough that you can implement them at first without needing to change the whole operations and ecosystem, and which generate enough value to justify for the prioritization and the investment costs for that. But as you are doing it use case driven, think about the roadmap. What else can you build on top of that? Since typically the investments in the first use cases can be more time consuming, more costly, and they might not be providing a good enough business case. But if you think about it as a first step and then taking the next steps to get the bigger benefits out of that, investment. Business and technology need to work together. So it's not just technology investment, it's not just taking 5G into use, but really thinking about the broader ecosystem, what can be done on top of it, where do we get the value, how do we change our operations with the digitalization enabled with 5G. Starting small from early use cases, scaling up. So one common problem is that that companies tend to make things too complicated, that aiming up at kind of a comprehensive picture on what things we need to do, and thinking about use cases that might be kind of the prioritized use cases, but require development of multiple technology areas, require huge investments in the infrastructure. But if you find small use cases and implement them and prove the 5G technology, quite often it is adoption of 5G phones or 5G connectivity and trying out and getting experience from 5G, getting reliability and kind of understanding that this is a good solid technology that we can use. And once we have it, we can test out different use cases on top of that. And then if you have once you have those good experiences, then scaling up step by step, finding out the next use cases and involving from that on. And fourth one is build ecosystem early on. So you need to have typically much bigger ecosystems to implement it than before. Many use cases are pretty complex, requiring lots of different technologies, lots of different players contributing to the operations and changing the way companies are working. if you think, for example, about a smart city that is providing measuring on different lampposts and providing air quality measuring and temperature measuring, video feeds, and they can get the information from many different sources, also combining it to, for example, buses having videos on video cameras on their screens and providing the live footage from vehicles to that same platform, and combining all that information and opening it to different players to utilize it. So you could have totally different business models where you gather data and monetize that data, open it up to provide new business opportunities for different players. And then you need to think about different business models, who makes the investments, what are the rules of the game, how the data is utilized, who owns the data, with what kind of terms. So these are very complex ecosystems that might change very radically the roles of different players. But at the same time, they provide huge opportunities for those companies that act on the opportunities that the new technologies provide. So this was my lecture part, and happy to hear about the questions that there are on the chat.
Thank you very much, Sami. Indeed, interesting. Very good lecture, I have to say, really.
Thank you.
I can see that you have done these kind of lectures before.
I have a background in lecturing as well, but not in many years. So lately been moreover discussing with the companies. And usually there's just like a 15 minutes or 30-minute time slot to go through the story. So it was really good to have the thorough time to go through the little bit more kind of philosophical side as well to the 5G opportunities.
Absolutely. And of course, when we are thinking about the teaching and learning, what we are doing here in Aalto University as well, it's not only about the content, it's about how you are presenting it to the people in order to make them learn the main points, what you are saying here.
Yes, learn and think. That's the key thing that I'm trying to
And I think
cultivate.
One of the good meter is also that if you ask, for example, our students or listeners after 1 week, that, okay, you were listening Sami's lecture last week, what can you remember?
Exactly.
Then usually it's few key points, or you told a good story, or you had some kind of funny picture, how you are able to make that kind of education. You really done that well.
Right, thank you, good to hear.
Hey, one question what I have more or less asked everybody during this autumn is that, yes, you are competitors with some other operators as well, what we have heard, but then on the other hand, as you said also before the lecture, that cooperation between different actors, it's like a necessity.
Yes.
But at this time, I will make an exception for you. So if you can, and you can now brag, why DNA's 5G is better than the competitors, what would you say?
Yeah, so we have basically one competitor bragging that they have the widest 5G coverage.
Yes.
We have to say that we have the fastest 5G network.
Fastest one.
Yes, so we have many independent studies showing that DNA's network is fastest in comparison to the Finnish peers.
Good. We heard the message. Hey, one other issue before going to Henrik's and Yrjö's questions. What about security? What kind of role of security and cybersecurity in DNA plays in the context of 5G?
Yeah, so security is definitely like inbuilt into the 5G and mobile networks. So that's one good benefit. If you quite often you hear companies comparing 5G to Wi-Fi. So should you have Wi-Fi or should you have 5G, and in 5G and mobile networks, it is really the operator-grade security that is provided to the communications with licensed undisturbed spectrums. And this is a huge benefit. And of course, if you think about the security, and if we think about the value network or ecosystem picture I had, then it's not just about the mobile network security, but it's the end-to-end security. How do you manage the data flow securely? And this is, of course, not solved just by 5G, but needs to have an end-to-end perspective while planning the architecture.
Very good. Hey, let's go to questions what we have in chat. And the first one is from Henrik Stark. One could think that 5G could be implemented with new buses and trams like trains or Raide-Jokeri, which is like a certain kind of tram here in Helsinki and Espoo area. Has HSL or VR started working with 5G tech? Or if not, from DNA's view, what is the most surprising company or field that have started investing in 5G tech?
Yeah, so as this Henrik's question was about the public transportation, I'm not aware of the Helsinki's situation, whether there has been investments already. Some companies have already engaged into providing 5G connectivity in their buses, but we are currently working with one a little bit more surprising field, and that is a library bus within one of the largest Finnish cities, and they want to have 5G in their library bus, and we are pretty soon launching it together and having a big event for the launch, providing live feed from the library bus, and it will have their business systems running on the Wi-Fi network provided by the 5G within that bus with good connectivity. And also, of course, it runs on 4G in quite many areas where it's operating, but switching from 4 to 5G flawlessly is one of the reasons why mobile technology was selected for this. And then when they are stopping at some point, which typically is a little bit more central place in those towns, many areas have 5G coverage, so they can have live events brought to the library bus, connecting the main library, for example, to the bus stops.
Very good. Then a question from Yrjö Tolvanen. Any implemented use case to be described by name and practical business operations and benefits? Some hints were mentioned, like mines.
Yeah. So let's say that I'm not globally. There are quite many use cases described by name. For example, if you look into Ericsson's reports or such, there are big customers globally publicly talking about 5G use cases. We have, for example, done some use cases with Oulun Kaupunki that have been published, for example, in school environment, building AR, teaching, and so on. There are many use cases where we have built 5G, but we haven't gone public with them yet. So that's coming up soon. So let's follow the news. Next question is from Martin Roos. How will the emergence of reliable fixed 5G connections affect to the build out or fiber optics connections? Yeah, so basically the fixed wireless connection on 5G that described, that complements fiber. So we don't see that 5G is replacing fiber. So fiber is typically the primary selection, especially if you need higher data speeds and if you need uplink capacity, which is somewhat limited in 5G technology, which is more downlink bias technology. So loading from, for example, from the network to your device. So basically, it is complementing, it is providing this high speed to also many of the areas where fiber is not available or it is very expensive to implement. And also it works alongside fiber. If you want to have a secondary connection, quite many customers choose to have 5G to provide like higher backup connection. And especially if you have like a temporary use cases, for example, schools going into new locations during a remodeling of the school building, it doesn't make sense to build fiber connections for half a year time period, and it has delays and costs to it. So 5G can be implemented in that kind of use cases or events or construction sites or.
Yes. Will 5G be enough to satisfy customer needs in the realm of fixed connectivity?
Well, I don't think nothing can satisfy the customer needs, especially with the data rates going up. And so it provides a good step upwards. And of course, there are bottlenecks always that come up when the hunger gets bigger when you start eating. So basically, 5G's biggest bottleneck at the moment and also in the future is the uplink capacity. So it is more targeted to the use cases where you download things and watch videos, for example, than sending data. Uplink, it has good capacity uplink, but definitely more limited than for example, in fiber connectivity.
Yes. Another one from Martin Ross. What kind of exciting use cases does DNA see on the horizon as 5G matures and as 6G emerge in the future?
Yeah, so 6G is interesting. It has, let's say, probably many application areas that we can't even imagine at the moment, like receiving haptic feedback and working on holograms and such, but there's so much potential even in 4G at the moment that hasn't been explored yet, and even in 5G at the moment. So my focus has been on 5G and pushing that to the market. So basically there's a lot of exciting opportunities. So for example, shopping, that once you buy a furniture, before buying it, you can use augmented reality with your smartphone to fit the chair or table into your own home in real life, seeing how it looks, and reducing the number of returns significantly. And that's like very practical example. If we go into the B2B, I think you can, for example, have construction process happening in digital world at the same time. So you can do the plans in 3D modeling, and once you are doing the construction, you can automatically compare the kind of built reality to the model that you have, and get automatic errors that this wall is 2 centimeters in the wrong place. And then in the maintenance side, you can use that same digital model to kind of assess the real life conditions in that building. And once you have a maintenance need, you can just show the video feed from that place and provide the information, full information on what materials are used. And when you go on spot, you can show on AR assisting that this is the place where you need to do this type of operations to fix the problem. So it has huge implications for like spanning from the whole life cycle of different industries.
Very good. Last question, Sami. I know that there are several of our students online listening this interesting lecture, and probably some of them are thinking about their research topics. Do you have any good topics to our students concerning about the 5G that they could, for example, do
Yes.
their research paper?
Definitely. So if you are interested in more business side research, I think these are really the topics that that the companies are struggling with. So finding the use cases, how to construct the ecosystem around those use cases to reap the benefits of 5G, building the roadmaps and how to do those like 5G pilots, for example, and learn from them what is required from the organization, what kind of competencies are needed to build up that, and it has very interesting implications, especially when combined with AI or some other technologies and how they work on top of 5G.
Yes. Hey, Sami Häggman from DNA, thank you very much visiting Aalto University and giving this excellent lecture.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jarno, and thanks a lot for all the listeners. Hope you had lots of good ideas coming from this introduction, and hopefully you will have something to remember when thinking back to this, when, for example, thinking about the thesis topics. Thanks a lot and have a good night.
Very good. And as you know, all the lectures are being recorded and you can look at these recordings afterwards and you can find these on our web page. So thank you, everybody. We will continue after 2 weeks, not 5G weeks, but 2 weeks. And we will have the last lecture of this autumn lecture series. And the topic then is not going to be 5G. We are talking about 6G. Thank you very much.